If on alert, you will know that it is the global 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And of course, Kenya has also joined in on this great deed towards ensuring that we make gender-based violence a game of the past. Battle that we fought for a long time. We seem not to get gains, or we are getting gains, is what we'll be discussing this morning. And we just ask ourselves, what is it that we need to do to ensure that indeed, in totality, this is a game of the past? This is happening at a point where people do not want to come out and speak. There's a lot of stigma that is, associated with this. And we keep saying that we need to have people coming out, speak of this, so we go against this vice. And this morning, we're privileged to have a human rights lawyer. So you can be rest assured that as we have this conversation, we're also going to look at the legal aspect of it, which is so challenging, especially when you see these cases get into court. And in most cases, the victims do not end up getting justice. What really could be informing this? What is enshrined in law that would help us address some of these issues? It's pretty much crucial that we have this conversation. And welcome on board. We'd love for you to be part of the same. Hashtag Morning Cafe at Linda_Lela. The numbers to call running down on your screen. And I mean, at some point in time, we all agree that maybe we've gone through these tough moments, or we know a person who's gone through gender-based violence. And sometimes we choose not to speak about them because we feel like it is shameful. It is not. It is important that you come out and speak. Christine Alai, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, she's the guest of the day, like I said, a human rights lawyer. And before we even delve deep into the legal aspect of this, it is also very important that we get to understand, what about these 16 days?
Thank you for having me on the show, especially during such a moment when we're commemorating the 16 days of activism.
Yes.
That are geared towards bringing the global community together, women, girls, men, boys, leaders from all walks of life, to strategize together and to raise awareness for the need to eliminate gender-based violence in totality. And so that's what the 16 days of activism is about. We speak about where we are in terms of progress of achieving the various policies, laws, and strategies that we have put in place, but we also identify where gaps still remain and work together to see how we can improve things going forward for the lot of our women and girls, especially who are disproportionately affected, and men and boys as well.
All right, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that would have been my next question. Is it about the girls alone, or generally cuts across? Of course, we know that it's across all genders, but in most cases, it has been looked at as though it is the women that go through this more. Is it because the statistics show that it is more on women as opposed to men?
That is a vital question. In fact, I remember for quite a bit of time in the past year, there was this hashtag boy child, and what has been happening to the boy child. But indeed, women and girls are disproportionately affected, because gender-based violence have at their root, as their cause, gender-based stereotypes and biases that perpetuate them. It's because of the positioning of women as being inferior to men and boys that most of these vices occur. For example, I mean, it's not just sexual violence, which is the most commonly known, domestic violence, forced circumcision, child marriage, and numerous other forms of violence that are mostly caused by these beliefs, stereotypes, biases that we hold within society that have informed our social norms as to how we treat women and girls. Hence the reason why women and girls are disproportionately affected. But the same gender-based stereotypes, the same gender-based social norms are the ones that also affect men and boys. And also the lack of power. You find that for boys, those who are children are the ones who are mostly affected. In contexts of war or civil strife, you find that men are sexually abused because the intention of the perpetrators is to feminize them, or to humiliate them, or to make them less male. And so you see it's the same gender-based stereotypes that are actually driving violence, mostly against women and girls, but also against men and boys.
Well, of course, I started by saying the stigma is huge in this. And the way the society has perceived men to be is like, that notion where I told men, you're not supposed to cry, you're a man, you're not supposed to go through all this, you're not supposed to be weak. Getting them to that point where they would not come out to speak. Today, in terms of the progress that we've made, do you suppose that we are having men coming out there to speak about these vices meted upon them?
No.
They still do not.
We are far from it.
Wow.
We are far from it because we have not even addressed the barriers and challenges that women and girls face to come forward to report.
Okay.
For instance, now, if you look at the current data that we have, last year's National Police crime statistics indicate that there were at least 6,800 cases of sexual and gender-based violence in the country.
Okay.
Majority of these cases, up to 49.5% of these cases, were defilement.
Right.
Within this bracket of defilement, you had a larger percentage being incest. Now, that's just a tip of the iceberg of the actual statistics on the ground.
Okay.
You know probably better than most other Kenyans because you're in the media and you receive these reports.
Right.
Every single day, there's a case of a child somewhere, a girl somewhere, who has been sexually abused by close family members or relatives all across the country. So obviously, the statistics that we see are only a few of those who are brave enough to come forward to report. Now, this is on the part of women and girls who have been able to bravely bear the stigma and come forward.
Yeah.
Boys, men and boys, it's that much harder for them to break through those barriers because of the expectation that they cannot be violated. Yeah. And so the statistics are very, very low. In fact, the one set of documentation that tried to disaggregate the data is with regard to post-election related violence cases, most recently in 2017, where at least 201 cases were documented by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. And in their documentation, over 95% of these cases were women and girls, with a very small percentage being men and boys who had come forward. And so the social stigma becomes the first and most significant barrier that all victims encounter. But they encounter it at different levels because of how we perceive them. Right. Women and girls, because of the fear of being seen to be impure or immoral, or whatever perceptions that society will throw on them.
But before it even gets to that point, which I acknowledge is quite huge, and also the cultures and all that really continue to bedevil us and maybe acting as the greatest impediment to us making this progress. Awareness, I don't know whether there's much awareness on ground, especially knowing very well that some of these girls, are somewhere down there in the rural areas, rural homes and all that. And all of this that is happening and all the things that you've mentioned, some of them would look at, they would look at this as, the graces of culture. And some of them would be like, okay, well, so where do I start? It is my uncle that has done this, it's my auntie that has done this, it is my brother that has done this, but I'm in the middle of nowhere, so I am not aware where to start in the first place. If I'm going to tell my mom, what much can she do?
Very true. The lack of awareness, and that's why you find that even amongst, we have a broad population of women and girls who are affected. There are other women and girls within this category who are even further disproportionately affected because of other, what we call intersecting forms of vulnerability. So you're a woman or girl, and you also have not been able to access education, you're even further affected. You're a woman or girl who lives in a poor social setting, you're even further affected. You're a woman or girl who lives in a rural setting, you're even further affected. Or in a marginalized community. Why? Because you're unable to access even the most basic amenities, such as education, access to information on what your rights are in the first place.
It gets me to that point where I ask, we speak about this day in, day out. Honestly, are we hypocritical on the fact that we're saying we're putting so much effort to address this? Or are we even fighting a losing battle? Let's discuss that after the break. global 16 days of activism, against gender-based violence. And in most cases, when we're supposed to speak loud about this, you're always told, shh, do not speak about it. And we get pretty and we get, consumed in that. Fear is instilled in us, and we get to that point where we indeed keep silent about the issues that need to be discussed. So even after these 16 days, what will you be doing to ensure that indeed gender-based violence is something that we'll not be discussing in years to come? Because we'll have gotten to that point where the society respects every other human being as they are, and such heinous acts are not meted upon them. Still with us, Christine Alai, human rights lawyer. And I was asking this because I have dealt with this for the longest of time, probably throughout my career in journalism, which is not kidogo, or so to speak. Still talking about the same thing, and we're still saying that we're putting efforts. And I keep asking myself, are we making 2 steps ahead, 5 behind on this?
We have certainly come a long way compared to where we have been in the past.
Yeah.
However, we are still not where we need to be. And when we interrogate why we have not yet eliminated gender-based violence, we find that one of the greatest impediments is that we have failed to transform the social norms. We have invested a lot in establishing laws. We have enacted the Constitution that now specifically speaks to the right of every person to be protected from all forms of violence, and numerous other rights that protect us against gender-based violence. We have enacted numerous subsidiary laws, the Children's Act, prohibition against domestic violence, female genital mutilation, sexual offenses, regulations, policies, set up institutions. Now the challenge is we have drawn those gender-based biases from our communities and brought them into the formal system. Such that when a victim gets into the formal system to report what she has gone through, what she encounters is the same bias and stereotype that caused the violence against her being meted out against her at investigation, reporting, investigation, trial, and even at the stage of her receiving the remedies that she should access, as well as the kind of protection measures that she should be getting.
And now that brings me to this question. Of course, we'll be going automatically to the legal aspect of it. But first, the steps that you need to go through, the first steps after whichever form of gender-based violence has been made upon you. What do you do first?
The first thing is, of course, you want to find somebody that you can share this with in a safe and secure space, whether it be a close family member or a community member who has been working on gender-based violence issues within your area. And thereafter, hopefully, this person can help to accompany you through the various steps that you will need to take to address this issue. So the next level will be to seek emergency medical care. And we call it emergency because there's a specific period of time that is necessary. Within 72 hours to 150 hours is very critical. First, for you to be able to get emergency contraceptives to prevent any pregnancy, particularly if we're talking about sexual violence. Obviously, there are other forms of physical violence that may not require emergency contraceptives. And secondly, to be able to access other forms of care, sexual reproductive health care, post-exposure prophylaxis, and so on. Now here on the emergency contraceptive, it becomes critical to note that if you miss this 72 hours, many survivors have actually conceived as a result of being unable to access emergency contraceptives. We had a case that we recently concluded in the High Court, constitutional petition for a young girl who was 16 years. Her name was JMM. Sadly, she passed away as a result of the consequence of unsafe abortion. Because she conceived after being defiled. She went to a backdoor quack in a pharmacy who did all sorts of things, as many girls experience. And as a result, she got significant health complications, kidney, lung failure, and eventually passed on. Now, when we went to court, we were asking the court to make access to safe abortion services available to victims of sexual violence. And we came across strong resistance in
I'd want to question that too,
Yes, interpretation of Article 26(4 which says that abortion is not permitted unless, in the opinion of a trained health professional, it is determined that the life or health of the mother is in danger.
Yeah.
And the court has spelled out, it was a 5-judge bench. This is a landmark precedent decision that we have in Kenya today.
Okay.
That indeed, when a woman or girl is sexually abused, then her physical health, her psychological health can be significantly affected to the extent that she would be able to access, she should be able to access safe abortion services as part of the protection of her right to the highest attainable standard of health. Of course, with all the necessary caveats, that the determination has to be made by a trained health professional for her to access this. But because of the failure to provide the necessary sexual and reproductive health rights services, not just access to safe abortion, but in the first place, emergency contraception, where it fails, access to safe abortion, prophylaxis, dealing with fistula, ensuring that there's long-term psychological support to deal with the trauma is all critical. Our services are failing. Last year, I was part of a research with UN Physicians for Human Rights and Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. We went across several level 5 health facilities. And guess what? In places like Vihiga County, in Busia, Bungoma, Kisumu, they have shortage of emergency contraceptives.
Yes.
So can you imagine?
Could this have informed what we have today in the cases of high pregnancies, high numbers of pregnancies, teenage pregnancies for that matter? In most cases, you'd find that the girls do not come out to speak, say, okay, it's this individual, or it's a product of defilement and all that. It's
part of the problem.
Okay.
So, and this is where we normally underscore that dealing with gender-based violence is not a one-track. Even if today we went and provided emergency contraceptives in all health facilities, we will not be able to address a problem. But certainly, it is part of the problem that when these young girls experience defilement or sexual violence and eventually get to a place where they should be able to access care and support, they are faced with a system that is failing them, a system that has not invested sufficiently to ensure that they will be able to receive all the care, healthcare, psychological, psychosocial support that is necessary to help them to mitigate the potential consequences of this gender-based violence. Now you can imagine when a teenage girl falls pregnant at 14, 15, 16, 17, what does her future look like? You have robbed her of the opportunity to fully enjoy all her rights that are protected in the Constitution, to meaningfully participate in the socioeconomic development of her country, to be a wholesome person for the rest of her life. And this is what we are doing to over almost 50%. As our KDHS 2014 report shows, over 49% of women and girls in this country have experienced some form of violence. So that is what we are doing to our population.
Speaking of which, it brings me to that question I want to put across on the role of government in this. It looks like it's been left for the activists, a lot of activism that revolves around this. Hence the reason why we're actually calling it 16 days of activism, because it looks like governments are not coming in handy to address this. At least from what we see from the presser by of course Kobia the other day, you can actively say that at least the government is trying its level best to come in handy to address this. Do you suppose it has done its best in the case of our country?
It has tried, it has not done its best. When we look at the data, just look at the budgetary allocations, for instance. Where do we place gender-based violence? Let's start with the ministries. There is no ministry that is focused on dealing with gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is dealt with as a department within the broader Ministry of Youth, Gender Affairs, and sports, I believe.
Yes. Right? Margaret Kobia's
social cultural affairs, yes. So it's not given the kind of attention that is deserved. Just recently in July, the president issued this statement when he was talking about COVID.
Yes.
And raising the issue that during this period, the incidences have increased. There's been a spike. National Council on Administration of Justice similarly reporting that just within a short period of time when the lockdown was initiated, over 35% of their cases within 2 weeks were sexual and gender-based violence cases. ODPP recently in their annual report, spike in cases. Yet, look at how much we have invested in dealing with COVID pandemic. Look at how much we have invested in dealing with anti-corruption. Look at how much we have invested in dealing with counterterrorism. We could name numerous issues where as a country we have felt that it's a national crisis.
Accountability is a problem, and all those dockets that you've mentioned, so much money has been allocated to that. But again, we do not get results. So, I mean, the little that has been awarded to this one, do you suppose has done something or has gone a long way in trying
Yes, we can certainly count achievements. We can count achievements in the form of a few one-stop centers. And one-stop centers here are places, particularly in health facilities, where victims can come and receive care at one place without having to move to 10 different places. However, these are only available as we speak today in 12 health facilities, level 5 health facilities across the country, out of 47 counties. So yes, progress, but how much, right? And if you have it at level 5, and you have an entire county where you'll have victims coming from the lowest level, it means that you have advantaged those who are in the capital centers and disadvantage those who are in rural areas or remote areas. That needs to be addressed. Most recently, the National Police Service has set up what they're calling polycare. Now, it has so far been set up in Nairobi. I believe it's at Kenyatta Hospital. Now, the difference with the polycare is that it not only focuses on the healthcare services or that may be necessary, but also the legal aspects of it. So there will be an investigator in the unit, there will be a police officer in the unit, and eventually they have proposed that there should be a magistrate brought on board to determine the cases that are processed through this. It is one station, one step forward, currently in Nairobi. It must be scaled down. And one other issue that I could mention is safe shelters, right? When survivors fear the reprisals that come with reporting and look around them and see no protective mechanism, your bet is as good as mine. They will not come forward. And guess what? Up until mid this year, there was not a single safe shelter across this country that had been set up by the state. The very first state-established safe shelter has been put up by Makueni County this year. All other safe shelters that you have in this country have been set up by non-governmental organizations and faith-based organizations. Very few. The need is large, the opportunities are very few. And you'll only have these organizations being able to accommodate victims only, or victims and their children only, for a very short period of time. This has to improve. There needs to be better safety and protection mechanisms for survivors, and government should come and work together, hand in hand with these sectors, to improve the lot for survivors. And accountability. The rates are very low compared to the number of cases that we are seeing. Proceedings take a long period of time. For example, we've been in court for 2007, 2008 post-election violence cases since 2013. We filed a constitutional petition for 8 victims in 2013. We are now hoping to receive the judgment on 10th of December, International Human Rights Day, more than 7 years since the case was filed. Victims get tired. They get re-traumatized through the process of being moved from one judge to the next. Like in this case, they were moved through 5 judges, having to retell their story numerous times. Some of them fall off, right? Now, what is the implication of not getting justice for these victims? Impunity. Perpetrators get emboldened to do it over and over again.
Hold it right there, because that has been a huge debate. I mean, we've seen perpetrators confidently coming out to say that, you know what, you're going against me. You are a perpetrator. It is well known, black and white in court. But again, like you rightfully put it, sometimes they're let scot-free. And you can see them, and well, you can almost be sure that they're going to do that again. Let's shift gears a bit and, overlook what it is that we've not done, and for a moment ask ourselves, what is this? Or better yet, enlighten the people on what is there that is in existence, that right now, if such a case is to happen to you, you know what it is that you're going to do in terms of, the legal and constitutional mechanisms that would come in handy to protect some of these victims.
Okay. So the first thing you can do is you can report directly from your home to a hotline known as number 1195.
Okay.
So hotline number 1195.
Toll free?
Toll free.
Okay.
Report your case. 1195 will be able to assist you with referral services from wherever you are in this country. Link you up to the closest health facility, to the closest legal aid services that are available, so that you can get the necessary assistance. Police also have a hotline, the same 911. You could call and they'll be able to provide some assistance as well. So that's in terms of reporting. In terms of moving to the next stage, the expectation is when you report to a health facility, you should be able to get medical care. But when that medical care is being done, the health professional should also collect evidence in the form of a document known as a post-rape care form. So after you have finished the services that you're receiving, make sure that you ask the clinician who is offering you services, do you have a post-rape care form? Okay. The post-rape care form is required by law under the Sexual Offences Act. A clinician is expected to collect the history of the victim, all other samples, vaginal swabs, clothes that were worn, and all that are supposed to be urine, whatever else, that are supposed to be subjected to tests that can help to prove or disprove the occurrence of sexual violence, penetration, existence of spermatozoa, and so on, that can support very strongly a case in a court of law. Now, this post-rape care form works hand in hand with the P3 form.
Yes.
Because when you go to report to the police, you will also receive a P3 form. This is a police medical report that is then taken back to the health facility where you went to also be completed. However, looking to the future, we hope that there can be reforms so that the post-rape care form and the P3 form are harmonized, so that victims get it once. Beyond the immediate emergency care you receive, you should also receive psychological support at a minimum of 3 counseling sessions. This is required under our national guidelines on clinical management of sexual violence, where clinicians are supposed to offer you a minimum of 3 sessions of counseling. There have been best practices, for example, peer counseling sessions where different age sets of victims are put together, adolescents, older women, and so on, for peer counseling sessions. And then after that, when you have the P3 form, investigations should commence.
Right.
All the necessary evidence is brought together, including the medical legal evidence. Some of it will be taken to the government chemist for testing. Sometimes it takes much longer. Nonetheless, the analysis is brought back. You proceed to a court of law, and the process should commence.
Stigma in the corridors of justice for both perpetrators and the victims.
Yes, huge, huge. And that is why today as we speak, we don't know what the real figure of those who are affected is. The statistics we have tell us just a tip of the iceberg of the story, and we could easily multiply it numerous times. To deal with stigma, it starts with you and I, Linda. This is where the crux of the matter with gender-based violence is. For as long as you and I, and all of us collectively, have not worked at shifting our attitudes about the position of women and girls, about the roles of women and girls, and men and boys, positive versus negative masculinity, right? What it means to be a man is not that you can hit a woman when you feel offended. What it means to be a man is not that you can defile a young girl or boy because you have the power to do so. Being a man or woman does not mean that you look down upon the other sex as being capable in society in all forms. So it's not just about the sexual violence, it's actually about all other facets of our lives, of our social norms, of the things we do in our workplaces and in our homes. We must begin to challenge those attitudes. Only then can we begin to fight gender-based violence. And that's where the gap is. because we're investing a lot in the laws, we're investing a lot in the policies, we're investing in the mechanisms, in the polycares, but we're not shifting the attitudes. We're not investing in education, in our curriculum, sexuality education, to empower the girls to know that when you're growing up, your body will change in certain ways. How do you deal with it? What services do you have available to you? Can you access contraceptives? It's a debate that we've been having.
Yes.
But we have dug our heads in the sand and continue to hold ourselves with this high moral attitude that fails to acknowledge the needs of our young girls and women. That needs a shift, because what we are doing is, while we hold ourselves up in this high pedestal, we're exposing the young girls because we have refused to offer them the information, the services that they need. And then they get vulnerable and they get abused. So let's shift our attitudes through education, through awareness, through information, through community dialogues, through special measures, affirmative action. Why have we refused to implement the two-third principle? That is the elephant in the room. It epitomizes where we are with our social norms. If we're unable to even implement measures that ensure that women and girls can make it to political spaces, where else are women making it?
All right. As we get to wind up, 3 key things that have been, in the mouths of many in the country. And I know this is a huge debate. We might not be, I can't even exhaust all the questions that I have for you, but from where we are or where we sit, I think that was very good in terms of informing the people. But the sexual reproductive bill, the age of consent, this aspect of protecting or addressing the aspect of perpetrators in the country, key contentious issues that we continue to deliberate on, debate on. What would you make of them?
I think, just as I was saying, where the resistance is comes from our social norms. So the provisions that are contained in the reproductive health bill, for instance, have been made contentious because of where we have placed ourselves as a society in terms of the norms associated with whether young girls and women can access comprehensive sexuality education, whether they can access safe abortion services, why or why not. It's no longer a clinical question. It's no longer a scientific question. Those have been addressed. Clinicians will tell you about the age that is appropriate for young girls to access contraceptives. They will tell you about the data of the young girls who are undergoing unsafe abortions in back streets. But where we are stuck is our moral code
cannot.
Our religious code. What does our constitution say? Let's get back there. Let's get back to protecting the rights of our women and girls as provided in the constitution. My religion and yours differ. My cultural beliefs and yours differ. Whose will win? Whose will carry the day? Only our constitution must carry the day.
Do we need to say more? I think we need to have this conversation some more another time.
Thank you.
Time was really not fair in any way, but all the same, the conversation continues on social media platforms. Everyone out here is speaking about this crucial 16 days, started on the 25th of November, and we're still on, and we'd love for you to be part and parcel of this. Like we said, it is gender-based violence. It cuts across. It's a conversation that should be had by everyone. We should not shy away from having this conversation. Christine Alai, human rights lawyer, thank you so much. And you back at home, also for the feedback. We might not be able to go through all of them, but all the same we say asante, and let's come out and speak, because that's the only way we get to end this vice. Thank you so much. My name is Linda Alela. We wind up Morning Cafe. Later on, I'll come your way on Matters News to update you accordingly.